Well, the surging demand for critical minerals is reshaping global dynamics, China's dominance posing a challenge for Western nations. The US and EU are trying to catch up and reduce their reliance on Beijing. And Australia, the biggest producer of rare earths outside of China, wants to leverage its role as a potential alternative. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has pledged to create a critical minerals reserve, seeking to secure supplies for the materials crucial for clean energy, smartphones and military technology, amongst other applications. Let's bring now Vlado Vivoda, who's the Industry Fellow at the University of Queensland Sustainable Minerals Institute. Vlado, really great to have you with us. And, we talk a lot about the opportunity for Australia, the access that there is. I do wonder if you can kind of set the scene in terms of meaningfully, substantively, how much access Australia has at the moment and what would be required to get to scale and meaningful levels of production.
Look, Australia holds some of the world's richest reserves of critical minerals, including nickel, lithium, indeed rare earths, and others too. Yet it continues to operate mainly as an upstream supplier. So the country now faces a defining choice in a way: remain a raw material exporter, or strategically invest in downstream processing and advanced manufacturing. So I think it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the country, but it requires quite bold and long-term decisions that won't necessarily make economic sense in the short term. But I think that some of the decisions already taken by the government are in that direction, including the national critical minerals stockpile. But more needs to be done in this space.
What needs to be done to break Beijing's stranglehold, which of course has been building? It's interesting because this is not a new kind of development, right? We know that this has kind of been the crown jewel for China for decades. So what does Australia need to do to get to that point? Because at the moment there's only perhaps one or two players that are even close to having that meaningful level of strategic competition.
Indeed. So China isn't just any player; it's the dominant force in the processing and refining of critical minerals. So that's the real choke point here. So breaking this dominance will take years of strategic investment. It will take a lot of coordination between governments, and it will take very careful navigation of various hurdles along the way. So Australia is only beginning to build that capacity. But what it needs is strategic investment in processing, refining at home, midstream infrastructure, because all the mining in the world won't deliver real sovereignty or supply chain security or diversification away from China. What's required really is that push into midstream, into processing and refining at home. And advanced manufacturing as well, integrating those supply chains away from actually reliance on China. Because at the moment, what we have is a lot of Australian critical minerals heading to China, where they're processed and then used in the production of advanced tech, and then perhaps exported to the United States. So if the United States and Australia are really serious about reducing their dependence on China, it's a matter of actually supporting each other and supporting the United States, supporting Australia in making those strategic decisions towards establishing a greater industrial base at home, advanced manufacturing, processing, refining of critical minerals, so that they don't have to go to China and then via China into the US. So that's really the whole game that's being played here, I think.
Vlado, I wanted to pick up on that last point because there's been a lot of criticism, certainly from within the industry, from Aluka, for example, saying it's all well and good that we have these resources, but what needs to be done in terms of a complete supply chain, right, in terms of, as you say, the processing, the manufacturing end, and not just shipping them off to offshore?
Look, I'll give you an example of what's happened in Australia over the past year or two. It's been, a lot of nickel mines, for example, have gone into care and maintenance. And this is because of China's dominance of this market, where it's literally by pushing down the price, it's made these projects uneconomic, unviable. So I think that push towards creating a stockpile in terms of strategic protection of certain mining and processing and refining projects that are deemed essential for national and economic security, if you like, for Australia and its allies, I think those decisions need to be made, because otherwise, if we just leave it to the markets, we're not going to be left out with any of the nickel or rare earths at all. These are strategic decisions, and they need to be made not just with not having the likes of Iluka on the table, but together. What sort of mechanisms can be developed and put in place so that rare earth producers, for example, are supported, are strategically supported, are protected, so they can actually establish a foothold in the entire supply chain and are not really at the mercy of China, are just beating them out of the market.
Vlado, I wonder if you could weigh in on the extent in which you've actually been seeing a shift, if any, from the US approach to this, and perhaps how that's trickling through into Australia's considerations compared to the Biden administration. What are we seeing in the current Trump administration?
Sure. Look, I think that the critical minerals policy from the US perspective has been very consistent. It's not much has changed. Critical minerals have not been included in any of the tariffs discussion. They've been excluded from that. So I actually think there's a lot of consistency and bipartisanship, in fact, in the US approach to critical minerals. And in fact, the Inflation Reduction Act flowing into the America First policy, again, there's a lot of consistency there. Yes, certain mechanics have changed, but it's all about reshoring, bringing it back home, building supply chains at home, bringing that industrial base back to America. And I think in Australia, we're seeing a bit of that, copying what the Americans are doing exactly, word to word. It's not going to work in Australia. It's a very different country, different economy. But how can we integrate the two economies to support each other, right? To find those synergies. I think there's a lot of space, a lot of opportunity for that at the moment. But going back to the US policy, and that's a great question, really, I think there's been a lot of consistency from Trump 1 to Biden to Trump 2 in terms of critical minerals, at least.
Vlado, really great to have you with us. Vlado Vivoda, who's an industry fellow at the Sustainable Minerals Institute. We do have much more on Australia ahead every Tuesday at 10:40 a.m. if you're watching in Sydney, 8:40 a.m. in Hong Kong. Plus, you can always tune into the Bloomberg Australia podcast as well, which delves into the biggest stories shaping the country's role in global business. You can find that on Apple, Spotify or Bloomberg.com.